Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's begin with a short AV of IIFL Wealth.
In 2008, IIFL Wealth dreamt big. Today, we are the leaders in wealth and asset management, credit solutions and succession planning. With more than $27 billion of assets under management, the trust of over 6,500 families. We've achieved this faster than any other Indian financial enterprise, not by following the cardinal rules of financial success, but by writing our own. We've challenged the definition of conventional management and proved that conviction and hard work are the fastest routes to success. We haven't hired employees. We've attracted people with an owner's mindset. Because when you own something, success becomes personal. Ours is a company where owners work and workers own. Today, we can put an exact number on the revenue we've generated, the profits we've made, the taxes paid, the awards we've won, and the number of lives we've transformed. What we can't put a number on is the unending trust we've built. It's not without reason that we've chosen the Shri Yantra to define our purpose. With a symbol that embodies Goddess Lakshmi's tool to create unending wealth, we are well prepared for the next decade and more. We are here. We are now. We are IIFL Wealth.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this interesting interaction with Dr. G.S.K. Velu. We have two gentlemen, both entrepreneurs in their own way, to moderate the session. Mr. Pramod Kumar, Senior Managing Partner at IIFL Wealth and Chief Investment Officer for IIFL One, will join us later in the interaction. Pramod co-founded Wealth Advisors, and prior to that, he has had successful stints at DSP Merrill Lynch and ICICI Bank. And to introduce us to ACE, we have Mr. Anas Rahman Junaid, Founder and Managing Director of Hurun India. He has led Hurun to chronicle the inspiring stories of India's wealth creation. A stint with KPMG, a graduate from the University of Oxford, he is the most authoritative voice for wealth creation in India. Over to you, Mr. Anas Rahman Junaid.
Thank you, Anil. I hope you can hear me. Good evening, everyone. Hope each of you are staying safe. On behalf of Hurun India and IIFL Wealth, I would like to thank you and more importantly, welcome you all to the very first edition of our talk series titled ACE, which is the acronym of Act, Change and Emerge. We have been compiling the Hurun India Rich List over the last 9 years. What started as a list with 100 individuals from 14 cities have grown to more than 850 individuals from 75 plus cities over the 9 years. And I believe that we have only scratched the surface. We believe wealth creation is a fantastic thing, and when done transparently, it deserves a lot of respect. IIFL Wealth Hurun India Rich List is all about promoting transparent wealth creation. Multiple times during the lifetime, a successful company or an entrepreneur goes through strategic inflection points. These strategic inflection points help individuals or companies make their own compasses. This compass help them understand its true north and conversely the due south as well. Very similar in the 80s when Intel, being the global leader in memory chips, moved to semiconductor business as a reaction to Japanese tech. However, the last year, the COVID-19 pandemic is testing the limits of the very definition of these inflection points. Since 2020 March, the companies have been facing uncertainties and challenges like never before. And we believe hence it is imperative that knowledge sharing sessions with industry stalwarts take place more frequently. Their stories of sustenance, strategy, survival, and success through the pandemic would hopefully serve as vaccines to inspire and teach. ACE is an attempt at facilitating such sessions. As we embark on this journey today, Pramod and I are happy to be speaking with a technocrat, serial entrepreneur, a healthcare industry expert, all rolled into one, and my dear friend, Dr. G.S.K. Velu, Chairman and Founder of Tributron Healthcare. This exclusive session will be accompanied by a short Q&A at the end of the discussion. Please make the most of it. Once again, thank you very much for joining us on the very first edition of ACE. And we really look forward to having a great conversation with you later this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Anas. It is a privilege to have with us Dr. GSK Velu, a technocrat, serial entrepreneur, healthcare industry expert. Dr. Velu's vision, determination, and futuristic approach to make healthcare accessible and affordable made it possible for lakhs of people across the globe to have cost-effective access to medical technology, diagnostic services, eye care, dental care, super specialty hospital care, and dialysis services. Dr. Venu is Chairman and Managing Director of Trivitron Healthcare Group of Companies, the largest Indian medical technology company in the world, and a torchbearer of Make in India initiative in the medical devices segment. Besides, he is Chairman of Newberg Diagnostics, mentor and shareholder of Kaveri Group of Hospitals, Chairman of Maxivision Eye Hospitals, founder of Apollo White Dental and Apollo Dialysis, anchor investor at Stakeboat Capital and GSK Ventures, and honorary counsel to the Republic of Estonia in India. Dr. Velu holds several key positions in trade associations like CII, AIMED, and is the chairman of FICCI Tamil Nadu State Council for the year 2021. Most of us are aware of his success story, but there are always lesser known stories of struggles, missed opportunities, and resilience, which we hope to listen to and learn from Dr. GSK Velu through this interaction. Over to you, Dr. Velu, and thank you so much for making it here.
Yeah, thank you. And it's my great pleasure to be here today. And particularly with two organizations which I have been associated in some form or other for many years now. And I know Anas and Rupert for many years now, since the time they started conceiving these Varun ideas. And they came and told me I'm rich. First, I refused to agree. I told him I don't want to be appearing in that list, if Anas remembers that. So then we slowly accepted, yes, having wealth is not a crime in this country. So I think Harun really has done that job of being celebrating wealth. And as he said, transparent wealth, which is what I think a country like India has. And if you go back and see in any country, whether in the Western world, including US, Europe, Japan, I think entrepreneurship and wealth is appreciated and they created the economy. So I think that's something we as new generation entrepreneurs, we had to live with it. And we started accepting being rich is not bad, or having wealth is not bad, as long as you use it rightly and become socially responsive to everything what you do in life. I think thanks, Harun, for making us understand our wealth and also become responsible to our wealth. And IIFL in another way is when I got a little wealth, the first people who approached me was IIFL. Whenever you start getting some money, IIFL will be there in your doorstep. But they have been a great partners for me many years now in terms of advising me, because we as entrepreneurs, we are huge risk takers. So they actually mitigate risk, saying don't put all your money in your business, give something to us and we will safeguard it for you. I think IIFL has been doing a great job. I'm happy to be with Anas and Pramod, two people and two organizations which I respect the most. and particularly this concept when he came, it's quite interesting when he said act, which is what ideally I would have liked it to be a pace where we first plan, then act, then change, then emerge. But in this case, past 1.5 years, if you see right from past March, we had no time to plan. All of us are acting, changing, emerging every month, and we don't know what is in store for us, the next moment. And that's the kind of roller coaster ride we are having, both personally and professionally. Personally, I'm sure each one of us are affected in some form or other. To the extent, even my father-in-law is right now in our hospital, recuperating from COVID. So everybody, I think, whether friends, family, loved ones, all of us are affected. And particularly places like Bombay, Delhi went through real horror time in the second pandemic. So if you see the first pandemic, when we all started, I think we really did very well as a country because we went into lockdown faster and we planned it well. But of course, somewhere we got a little complacent. I wouldn't say this whole thing, what we are facing in COVID in the second wave is completely, we should blame the government. I think it's a responsibility of each one of us, and we all left our guard down, and we are paying some kind of penalty for it. And it's not too late yet. I think we are already seeing some hope in places like Delhi, Bombay coming back to normalcy slowly. And we are undergoing trouble in southern parts of India like Chennai, Cochin, Calcutta and other places are still going through trouble time. But I'm hopeful that in the next few weeks, we will be able to come out of it. So if you really, for me, the COVID first, we came to know about COVID when I was in Dubai in January, where my Chinese colleagues, we have a factory, we have a joint venture in China, in Jinan, and they came and told about, that is the time we came to know something like this is coming, and Chinese were, the flights were getting disrupted and all that. So that time only we started thinking what it is. Initially, we did not even know what to do. We thought it would only be remaining with some parts of China. Just within a couple of months, the whole world got it. So that is the time I think many of the business houses, everybody had to innovate. Any company which did not innovate, act, change or emerge could not survive. So all as entrepreneurs, I think whether they are running a small organization with 1-2 crores revenue or multi-billion-dollar organization, everybody has found ways to protect their own employees and possibly just go much beyond your own employees and your own people and go back and do something to the society. I think I would say big thanks for everybody who really protected the industry as a whole, economy as a whole. Government did their best. More than anything else, I am coming from the healthcare industry, the healthcare workers, the nurses, the paramedicals, the doctors, they did really selfless service. This is the first time I felt so happy for being in healthcare industry. So of course, it has really been an eye-opener to us. India has been absolutely healthcareless many years, right from independence. Past few years, we are doing something, but during the COVID, we are realizing we are still not there. Our infrastructure is, really lacking. The amount of money we spend in healthcare is not adequate. Our infrastructure in rural area is still not done. So I'm sure as healthcare professionals and government, we will do something first to become India self-sufficient in healthcare. If you don't become self-sufficient in healthcare, we forget about any economic growth. So I think that is not about just how much money you have as foreign reserve or what are the infrastructure or, if you don't have health and education, no country can become an advanced country. I think it's a huge eye opener for us. All of us have realized, as general public, we have realized this, as government has realized this, as entrepreneurs, we have realized it. So it's time for all of us to act together to make India healthcare sufficient and become an advanced country in healthcare first, then think about other things. Because if we can't protect our own population, then we really cannot be proud of what we have achieved over so many years of independence. And that's what I think we should do. A lot of learning from COVID. Each one of us have learned, and we have also learned. Our businesses have gone through a lot of transformation. And some of the businesses have done exceedingly well, not because, but just in finance, we feel comfortable and we feel very happy that we could contribute to the society during this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Velu. And to keep the pace, as Dr. Velu said at ACE, I now invite Pramod and Anas for an interactive session, post which we will open up for questions.
Good evening, everyone. I am very excited to be talking to someone who you can easily say is a personification of an entrepreneurial spirit. He's also someone who's, looks at taking on big challenges and critical problems. Dr. Velu, it's a pleasure to be talking to you. And also a big thank you to you for the role that you and your organization has played during this COVID pandemic. Many of us have been actual beneficiaries of that, efficiency, ability to step up and deliver the services at a very critical time. Reading your story, it's been hugely inspiring. And, what I would like, would be great if you could talk us through your deep passion for the medical industry itself, the healthcare, the wellness industry itself, and how you married it to become a successful entrepreneur.
See, for me, as I've told, I'm a village boy. I actually came from the southern Tamil Nadu in Kanyakumari district, from a village called Arulvaimali, where I studied in Tamil medium school. So one of the first inspiration for medicine was we had to walk almost 10 kilometers to reach even somebody called a doctor, who's probably an Indian medicine doctor, but we had to walk 10, 15 kilometers to do that. So I started thinking that why can't I become a doctor? That's how I really started inspiring to be in the healthcare industry. So I, of course, studied in Tamil medium school. In 11th and 12th, I went into my English medium school. At that time, I got reasonably 98 percentile in my maths, physics, chemistry. But I could not get a medicine seat because I was supposed to be in this forward community, and I lost it by 1.5 marks, because that was the time, like today, NEET, that time the entrance exam was introduced in Tamil Nadu. So the people in the city scored higher, and the village people like us, I lost in 1 or 2 marks, 1.5 marks, I couldn't get MBBS. So somehow I wanted to be close to be medicine. That's how I took, while I would have got any engineering discipline, I took pharmacy in BITS Pilani. And I did my pharmacy education with a specialization in biomedical engineering. That's how I got into a medical field. Then by entrepreneurship, I didn't know the spelling of entrepreneurship. It was just accidental entrepreneurship. First, I started working with my first boss in a medical device company. He wanted to do as a retention strategy to retain me because I did good job in the first couple of years. So he wanted to retain me and made me a shareholder in one of the new company which we floated. But the company which he floated, unfortunately, started doing much more better than the the original company. So then he started thinking a guy who's basically, I did all my education 2.5 years ahead. When I completed this Pilani, I was just 19 years old. So by 21, I became an accidental entrepreneur pushed by my boss. Then I realized sometimes being a partner with your own boss is not so easy. So of course, he was very helpful to me. I learned a lot of nuances of how to run business in Indian context there. Then in 1992-93, I went into a corporate career, worked for a US multinational for 5 years. Then I founded 97, I founded Trivitron, in 98, I co-founded Metropolis. And that is how my entrepreneurial journey, the formal entrepreneurial journey started. And it's always have been doing from 1988 to today, only 2 industries where I spend my executive time, which is medical devices and diagnostic services. Everything else is just an investment out of passion. Which I have done multiple other investments, and I consider myself as a mentor sometimes, or as a shareholder or a investor. That is how I look at many other businesses I've invested. But otherwise, I spend most of my time on these 2 businesses. Not today, for the past 33 years.
Go ahead, doctor, please.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you were asking.
So, one of the key other aspects, you made it sound very simple and easy, but, I'm quite amazed at the number of multiple businesses that you made, scaling them up, collaborating, growing organically, taking on multinationals. I mean, many of the businesses that you went in looked like they were the sole domain of multinational companies. Bringing your positive spirit. I mean, you obviously had some disappointments, even in your similar, getting your medical seat and so on and so forth. How do you translate that, and what would you define as your leadership style, your business philosophy?
See, what I call as in the medical language, I call as BP control, BPC, which I say basically belief, positivity, and commitment. As long as you have belief, positivity, sometimes passion and commitment, that gets you going. You never go after money to make anything in life. You basically go after passion. Which you have a passion, you want to convert that into a business idea. An entrepreneur, I think all successful entrepreneurs never went after money. They always went after their passion. And my passion was to do what I did in medical devices and diagnostics. I tried to replicate it in super specialty, dental dialysis, eye care, and all that in some way. But the central part of all our business is partnership. So basically, I think all my businesses was built in partnership. More than 90% of them are even today successful, because always partnership is about giving and taking. Second thing is empowering teams. So all our business, I'm able to run so many businesses simply because we find the right team, empower them, and motivate them and incentivize them to grow, because you are only as good as your team. If you find a good team to run your business, then the business runs by itself. I'm fortunate, even in Trivitron, when the people who actually I started in 97, from since then there are 10 or 15 people still associated with me in some capacity or other, standing with me rock solid in all ups and downs of the business. And same way with Newberg, even after I came and started Newberg just 3 years back, many people from my earlier my organization, both pathologists, doctors, and employee, my team members came and joined me. So if you have good teams, you can achieve anything. That's my business philosophy.
And your leadership role in FICCI, I know you look very, very young. I'm assuming you're possibly one of the youngest a person to take leadership role in FICCI. I just want to understand from you, right? Is it the need of the hour that more and more young individuals and entrepreneurs take signaling or opinion-making roles in these organizations? Because the world, as I mentioned in my introductory speech, we are really in a strategically inflection points, right? Is it important that young people such as yourself come forward in terms of taking up these leadership roles?
Anas, I don't know what is the definition of young. I don't want to tell my age. You can guess it, but I'm just, anyway, just reached 50 plus now. So not as young as you think. But in FICCI, basically, I'm associated with 15 years directly in different roles. Initially as a healthcare convener for Tamil Nadu. Then I was actually the National Service Committee, the National Health Service Committee co-chairman. And I just assumed my position as the chairman of FICCI. All these, industry associations, the main job is what? You don't want to take a singular voice. You want to take a collective voice to the government and policymakers. And that's the main purpose. So the designations or roles really does not matter. You are just representing a group of industry, and you are taking all their views. You are not really getting any personal agenda out of this. You are taking an industry agenda, and I feel very happy. Earlier, I used to always be representing healthcare industry. This time, as FICCI chairman, I'm able to take the much more the realistic and the whole global all industries in Tamil Nadu. So when I'm representing, I'm able to understand every industry has its own nuances, its own challenges. So it's a really new learning for me. And I'm very happy to take and represent the problems, particularly in current situation, COVID. Many industries are destroyed. And if you really see, and they all need support. They just can't survive on their own. Earlier, as healthcare industry, medical devices, particularly, I used to continuously say this cannot be compared with pharmacy, pharma industry, because we are new. It has to be supported. Now I see every industry is in trouble. So we really have to do something. The government has to do. The general public has to understand the industries are the core pillar of growth of any economy. So it's time for us really to be together. So really guiding and our leading industry association like FICCI in Tamil Nadu is a challenging role, particularly this year post-pandemic. So I do hope we can do something.
And talking about COVID, you are kind of setting up a role model by getting active in philanthropy. And also, I also really believe that philanthropy has to be spoken about, only then it inspires more individuals into giving, right? So from that perspective, right, and what do you think about the status of philanthropy? We've seen a lot of individuals coming up with donations and so on during the pandemic, but what are the general overall your comments on your thoughts on philanthropy in India?
Honestly, it is exactly like when we discussed a few years back when you told I'm rich. So I think that today I still feel philanthropy should not be told. It should be practiced quietly and confidentially is my thinking. Maybe you will change my mind as time goes by. Today, maybe, ideally we do a lot of philanthropic activities physically, but we don't neither quantify it nor publicize it. That's how we feel philanthropy should be done. But maybe things will change. As you say, maybe it's also good by actually publicizing something, and that's going to increase philanthropic activity. It's a good, it's for a good cause. So I feel philanthropy is very important. Government can do their bit. But people who earn has to also do their bit by being socially responsive to the needs. And today is the time, I think, all the little help we provide. Not only just we donated some money to Tamil Nadu government, but more importantly, we are actually we actually produce the India's cheapest ventilator. 1.4 lakhs we are supplying ventilators, which has capacity like 4-5 lakh ventilators, and we are pretty much we are selling it for losses. We already supplied around 1,200 ventilators, and we continue to support the government because all the prices have gone up, raw materials have gone up. So even supplying a product at loss is also philanthropy, or going and supporting with your own physical work. So whatever they can do. So it's all about one's ability to do. Whatever you are able to do, you should do. Particularly in a situation like this, where every bit of effort counts. All organizations have to support, all physical people have to come. I am a strong believer of India will come out of this as a stronger country. So I think it's just a matter of few months and India will be coming. People may criticize because few things gone wrong for a couple of months, but India is not about 2 months. It is, we are here for thousands of years, and this country is not going to go down because of one pandemic coming and affecting us. It's just a matter of time before we bounce back as a country. And I don't see it's too far. It's just a couple of months before we emerge back under country.
Absolutely.
Doctor, if we can spend a little time talking about the industry and, before we get down to the changes that you see in the industry. First of all, the industry, the healthcare industry was called upon, had no choice but to step up and they did remarkably well. What are some of the challenges that you saw, some of the inspiring stories that you witnessed, and how did your own organization evolve during this particular time?
See, we all as entrepreneurs and senior leadership can take some credit for that, but the real credit goes to the frontline workers, and they are the people really did the work. If I don't have my technologists and technicians right in the laboratory running the test, or nurses, if not being with the patient, COVID patients and giving care, and young doctors who are in ICU. Who actually treating, these are the heroes of my real this one. All us, we all guided, helped, and of course we also went to our workplaces and motivated them whatever we could do, but we could not do what they could do as frontline workers. So that really deserves huge comment. And we did not even know when it came last March, we did not know how to survive. Are we in a position to pay them? Unfortunately, even some of our initially our companies even thought about few months of even salary reduction. So, but independent of salary reduction, which we even had to announce in some companies, everybody committed even more work. I think that is what people were not, that's what we felt very happy to be in healthcare industry. And they all came, whether lockdown or no lockdown, they have to come. And a lot of difficulties in moving around. And there are people in apartments and other people did not allow them to come. This maybe in second wave, we are slightly better experience. In first wave was more difficult. And even today, they still stand in the front, and our ability to keep them motivated, and focused, it was the biggest challenge. And we had to give a lot of credits to our HR departments of our individual organizations. And I'm sure that is the case with every healthcare organization. They all had to individually talk to with thousands of people. If you look at our group, we have around 12,000 people in all the organizations I'm associated with. And imagine, these people are all, and healthcare is a very labor intensive industry. Only in Newburgh, we have 4,000 people. In Kaveri, we have, and also in Trivandrum, all these, we had to individually, the HR department had to talk and motivate them. And this pandemic has been even more painful. We are getting a lot of our people getting into hospital. And there are people who went into hospital just after 3-4 days of hospital, they came back to work because they know the responsibility, they have to be there. Unless they are there, the work will not happen. So I think that commitment of going through trouble and still coming back and working is amazing. And it is we have to really thank the healthcare workers of the world. And particularly in a country like India, we are not even paying as much like the other country. Particularly the entry-level people's salary levels are not as high as other countries, and their livelihoods and the style is not even like in other countries. With all that moderate earning, they were able to commit to help the country, and that requires a lot of appreciation, in my opinion.
That's truly amazing and inspiring and humbling also. Doctor, you spoke about this in your opening remarks, that how the healthcare industry has been underinvested, ignored for multi-decades as such. The pandemic has obviously brought a lot of focus on the industry itself. Do you see an attitudinal shift in terms of people willing to invest, the government willing to invest, and what is your take? Are we going to see a very different investment scenario, a commitment from society, and so on and so forth?
I think we have to do it. There's no way. I don't think we have a choice. We have understood now in this, if we don't invest now, I think people will start calling us foolish. Because a country which aspires to be in the global, this one, both privately and economically, we have to invest. I think the amount of money we spend in healthcare is one of the lowest in the world. Whether both from government, from private put together, we are not even spending half of what China is spending as part of GDP. So let us not compare with US, which spend 20% of GDP on healthcare, but we need to compare with other like-minded populous countries. China is a classic example. They are able to fight this pandemic better. We may say anything about that country, but they fought this pandemic because they had a better healthcare infrastructure, period. That has been built over the past several years. I know because I lived in China. Honest know about it. So we know what was it in 91, 92 when I visited China and what is it today. So they built a very strong fundamental healthcare infrastructure, which we did not do as a country. So we have to really start focusing on building healthcare infrastructure on rural country. I'm sure the government, we cannot blame the current government. It is a problem of what past 30, 40 years, if not 60 years, at least 30, 40 years, we did not invest. So we have to really start investing. I'm sure government also was increasing, but the incremental increase is not going to help. We need to have substantial increase in healthcare infrastructure. And we need to also really encourage private investments in healthcare. Lot more than what is being invested today, not only in cities, but also in rural areas and villages where we need both private healthcare, we need government healthcare, we need also NGOs coming and investing. And that's how we can build the healthcare ecosystem. It's no longer a luxury, no longer an option. It's a compulsion and we have to do as a country.
Great. So cool. The next question, before I go to the next question, I think I just want to convey to the audience that you can put the questions in the Q&A box, and we're more than happy to take it with Dr. Velu. I just want to ask a slightly deviating kind of question, right? So a lot of talks have been you invest into alternative asset classes through your investment vehicle skateboard. So I just want to understand from you, Dr. Velu, on how do you view all these noise and voice around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and Doge and all those guys? Have you ever thought about implementing, let's say, blockchain and managing health records in your healthcare enterprises? Do you have any views on that?
I consider these two as two different subjects. One is cryptocurrency, blockchain. Blockchain as a concept is great. You can invest in blockchain for logistics, blockchain in healthcare. There is something I think we are all considering, and I think it's here to stay. It will grow. Cryptocurrency is still, we don't know, a little early because currently there is no proper regulatory infrastructure. Even in countries like US is struggling. US, UK, Japan is little struggling. Means India is little few years away. So we have to create a right regulatory framework before getting into cryptocurrencies. Whether it is a Bitcoin or you are going for Ether or you are going for anything else. But we need to be really first building a proper regulatory infrastructure. And see, we are struggling with even conventional banking. There is so much fraud, so much other things going on. So in something like these things coming without regulatory framework could be quite challenging. But blockchain as a technology, yes, it can be. It need not have to work only in a cryptocurrency situation. It can work on in a conventional healthcare system, or medical device manufacturing. All this, I'm sure, that is something we all have to adapt as we go. But cryptocurrency, in my opinion, we can't avoid it for a long time. At some point of time, we need to adapt it. But before adapting it, we should need to have a very strong regulatory framework. That's my take on it.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions. So Anil, do you want me to read out the questions, or would you read it out?
Yeah, you could go ahead and read out the questions.
Okay. The first question is from Vasant Tamil Selvan. His question is, Doctor, how good you were with the numbers when you were starting out?
What is it?
How good were you with numbers when you were starting out?
Yeah, I got my max 200 out of 200 in my 12th class. I don't know whether it's a Tamil medium school in Tamil Nadu, but I was okay with numbers. Even today, I think I'm one thing which I really admire about myself is I keep remembering the numbers. So that's something which I've always been good at.
Doctor, there have been a few questions on what is your opinion on healthcare startups, and also what is your, you do invest in through your family office and others on startups and so on and so forth. What's your how do you go approach that investing style?
No, healthcare startup infrastructure is now improving in India. Earlier, I think obviously we are way behind what is happening in Silicon Valley or in some of the European countries or anywhere, because unfortunately the healthcare ecosystem or anywhere, there's a startup ecosystem here, always talk about doing something which is done elsewhere in a cost-effective way. It has never been a pure original innovation. I am looking for that day in which the pure original innovation comes from India. And that will make really our startup ecosystem, admirable, and it will receive a lot of investments. Today, I think people are investing on the India size, the economical size, and we are always been followers of something else which has been done, and we are trying to do it in most cost effective. The young people who are brilliant, I think the best of the minds are here. Even you go to US, I think most of the startup ecosystem is still done by the Indians who went from India. So it's just that we are not giving any opportunity for people to do. Hopefully, the years to come, I think government is doing their bit on private equity companies, but even PE companies are all looking at growth capital. The money available for startup is still much limited compared to what is in the Silicon Valley. But we do hope the system will emerge over the years. And once we start seeing some real original innovation, I think that will start getting the kind of focus what it has got in other parts of the world.
Yes. So there are a few questions on some of the bad press that few private hospitals or enterprises have got on predatory pricing and so on and so forth during this crisis. Obviously, a few bad apples, but your own view on that and pricing, and as a nuanced view would help. Yeah,
I think government did their bit by controlling whatever best possible. I think everywhere there are, but every profession has some good and some bad. The bad, as long as it's a very small part, then it's okay. So we cannot say there could be zero, bad elements in any industry. So there could be some bad elements, but by far the organized industry behave very responsibly. That's my thinking. All the top hospitals of the country really stepped up and they behaved responsibly and contributed. And they should be commended rather than always criticized. I think this is the time. Of course, there may be a few issues which may be quite genuine and action should be initiated and taken against such kind of people who are fleecing patients. But I don't think any one of these credible people from the medical industry, hospitals of good stature and standing, really looked at this as a huge money-making exercise. There may be a portion of that who tried, but not necessarily the major portion of it really stood up and contributed to the pandemic. Look at it from multi-speciality hospital perspective. This pandemic is actually reducing their revenue because their ticket size for other bigger surgeries were much higher. Actually, treating a COVID patient is not really profitable for them. So they are all came into doing COVID because it's a compulsion. We have to do it. In fact, government told us to do X amount. We are all now doing 3X, 4X out of compulsion. Initially, we all said this much only we can do. Now that we see people plight and people are suffering, we have to come back and do. When people are suffering, nothing is more important. Money is least important, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you, Doctor. Some of the questions, other questions are interesting. One other question is, what is your view on going public? And I'll expand that question to a more wider question in the sense, what was your view on healthcare accessing public markets, etc.?
I think that was shown by Dr. Pratap Reddy several years back. And he was the first pioneer in going to public market, and what is the kind of success he has generated, and he's been really both the Dian and my mentor and my friend also, and my guide. So he showed the way. Otherwise, private healthcare couldn't have been what it is today without we start accessing public fund and private equity fund and all that. So it's here to do. This country has 1.3 billion people. And I don't think government can provide healthcare to all of them, even if they want. So it's a combination of private, public, and NGO healthcare existing in common will do. So public raising funding from the public market is the best way to do. As you said, it's transparent wealth creation, and in the bargain, even public gains. So that's the best way to do it, and that will continue to happen. Not only here, all the top economies are doing it, and India should encourage. And I think healthcare will be one of the most sought after public assets in many years to come, in my opinion.
A few questions on, one in terms of, is it a good idea to start manufacturing of O2 concentrators, O2 generators to replace Chinese? Basically, the question is, should we become self-sufficient and not depend on Chinese imports?
Absolutely. So that is what our Trivitron is doing, or many other now medical device company in this pandemic has stood up. When we started in March, we were importing, not even a single RT-PCR manufacturing company was here. Today, we are not importing a single kit of RT-PCR in this country, or not even our rapid antigen. The testing industry, the IVD industry of this country has completely become self-sufficient. Even ventilators, there may be some controversies here and there with everything what happens in this country. But otherwise, again, these low-cost ventilators, India-made ventilators really stepped in to support the country. And the same thing with whether you talked about hand sanitizers or PPEs, or today we are talking about many other products. I think during the pandemic, I think Indians, we perform well in crisis. when the crisis slightly go away, we forget about it. That is the problem between the first pandemic to the first wave to second wave. When we become comfortable, then we forget to plan. Whereas the certain other economies, we continue to improve. So I think that's the only thing which we have to learn from here. So we have responded very well. And we continue to respond as medical professionals, and also as medical device industry of this country has really come to reckoning during pandemic. It is done. And there was even if we could not do it, the other companies were not able to export anything. When we were asking the large multinational to give testing kits, they said we cannot do it because we have to supply to US and Europe. So we have to do it. So from that angle, I think device industry will continue to, and there is no way we should be import dependent on any of these healthcare needs, including medical devices, should become completely import independent. Multinationals are welcome, like what China did. They are welcome, but they should come and establish manufacturing infrastructure, R&D infrastructure in this country, and grow along with the country by catering to its need. And that has been our thought process and feelings.
a few more questions have come. I'll try combining a few of them. What sort of, basically the questions are coming in terms of how do you get the government to start investing more into healthcare? And the second is, tier 2 cities need a different, infrastructure or a business model. So what kind of, infrastructure model would you recommend for tier 2? Especially the specific question comes from a 1 million plus town. And if there's land available, but how does one go about putting up a model there?
Yeah, that is where I think government had come up with some plans, but that was a little bit more complicated. It is, for example, they said 100-bedded hospital. They did not talk about investments. They did not talk about what kind of treatment facilities they are doing. So I think some vague policy measures have come, but I think it requires experts and doctors sitting together. I think time has come where the medical professionals and doctors are sitting to make policy decisions, not necessarily only administrators. Administrative officers are good in their own way, but it requires a lot more interactions. And one more thing is, obviously, till now it is private versus government. The government healthcare officials are good. They are all capable doctors and medical professionals. But we also need representation from private healthcare industry, who actually can sit as a team and start discussing on healthcare policies of this country, because they know from the government healthcare perspective. But 70% of healthcare is provided by private healthcare in this country. So, but we are not represented many times in policy making when it comes to healthcare decisions. So there, I think the government has to figure out some kind of a methodology in which private, public, NGO, all the three components of healthcare is sitting together to do policy making, not allowing all the policy to be decided by only the doctors working in the government segment. They start recognizing people working in private segment and NGO are also doing societal service and providing healthcare in this country. If we can create some kind of a structure, like they are trying to do that in medical education, so they should try to do that in healthcare services or diagnostics or medical devices, everything. I think we have to come together. This cannot be left to neither only to private nor to government. I think it's a kind of a partnership between public and private, not only on implementation, but also in policy making.
I have a very interesting question which has come up, which is basically, all the focus now seems to be on COVID. Have all other diseases disappeared, or in the sense that is this going to end up becoming a problem in the future because a lot of people are ignoring these problems? And how do you see? I
think that's a worry. Clearly, the worry which we as medical professionals have, because too much attention or only attention to COVID, and they are ignoring other healthcare ailments. We are seeing it in our testing industry. We are seeing that in our treatment, this, or even in medical device business. Certain things, what is being bought regularly is not being bought. So overall, I think too much of focus has gone into COVID, but unfortunately, we have to do it. There's no other choice. But we do hope it's very short term. If it continues for a very long term, it's going to have a significant impact in the long term, health of the whole society. So we do feel we have to also ensure, not while COVID has to be dealt with, but we cannot ignore these conventional ailments. People with need to be treated. And for example, in our dialysis care, now we have got specific dialysis centers only for COVID patients. So people have this fear, I go to dialysis center, somebody comes with COVID, and then I will contract COVID because I go to dialysis. And they postpone dialysis. There's no way you can postpone dialysis. So you have to go on time. So we are, as healthcare models, we are trying to give as much comfort to people by saying COVID patients are kept separate. Whether it is as simple as diagnostic centers where our sample collection facilities are separate for COVID and non-COVID patients, or dialysis being given separately. Even in hospitals, COVID wards are kept completely different. All that care, still people have that fear. Go to hospital, I will contract COVID. But but by not going to hospital, you may get into more danger. So basically, if you are going to go to hospital or a doctor, we have to go. While telehealth and home health is good way to actually supplement what we are doing, certain things cannot be overcome if you don't visit without going to a hospital. You can't do a CT scanner or an MRI or ultrasound or any of these procedures. So we have to go to a hospital. You have to go. There's no way you can avoid hospital. And hospitals, we are doing our best in hospitals, diagnostic center, dialysis center, everywhere to try to keep these care separate, COVID care and non-COVID care separate. So hopefully we should come out of it faster. Today, it is a worrying situation. Yes.
Doctor, a few more questions have come up. But one of the things which is very interesting is, we spoke about, the infrastructure part of it. Good questions come up, and how would you go about increasing doctors per capita without diluting quality? I know it's a longer term issue, but your own views.
That's what Dr. Devi Shetty is a good friend of mine. He is keeping on telling it about it for many years. Hope people listen to him. He has phenomenally good ideas on how this should be done, because we should start making more medical colleges. There are many more medical engineering colleges compared to medical colleges. But we need to increase the number of doctors, nurses, paramedicals, and all that. But we need to do it, there is, there are a lot of things going on between allopathic medicine, Indian medicine, and all that. All of them have a relevance. But end of the day, we can't be India alone. We have to integrate with the world. The world is following allopathic medicine, including China. They supplement with their own, traditional way of medicine. It can supplement, but they cannot replace allopathic medicine. So with that kind of a scenario, we need medical doctors. And we need more nurses. So we have to come with, reduce the regulations, allow more private hospitals and other people to start training medical people. We cannot follow some age-old policies which we have created many years. There has been some small changes over the years, but it requires radical changes, like Dr. Devi Shetty is suggesting on medical education enhancement. This has been one of his core focus area. Many times when I met, he also keeps saying, this is very important. We are not addressing the very basic issue of doctor ratio, doctor to patient ratio, nurses to patient ratio. These things has to be really addressed immediately.
Doctor, the other question that has come about is, how long do you think this process of changing or improving our infrastructure will take place? And, is telehealth itself, a solution? I mean, it's a good stopgap solution, but is it a long-term solution?
No, I think telehealth definitely has a big role to play, at least in easing out the pressure on hospitals by doing teleconsultation. But certain things you have to go to a hospital. Without going to a hospital, how do you do a procedure? But whatever you don't have to do, only now we are all doing in diagnostic home health. So at least pathology tests, basic, even sometimes we even send ECG and a basic X-ray home. So those things can be done. But beyond that, you need to go to a hospital. A combination of whole home health, telehealth, and conventional hospital-based or diagnostic service center-based health has to emerge. But how many years is a question mark? It depends on how fast we progress. If we progress very fast, then we are talking about still 5 to 10 years before we get some serious, infrastructure growth in this country. But if we don't move fast, it can be even much longer. So it's time. I think even if we do and we come to some of the other economy, even like China, for us to come, we are at least 10 years, 15 years behind. Forget about going like US or Europe, it might take much longer. But what China has done is a good example for us to see how they have improved their infrastructure, particularly the healthcare infrastructure.
Yes, some questions from your side.
Yeah, I think one question that I want to ask, which is on the audience side, is will there be a third and a fourth wave of COVID? And when will all this come to an end to focus on regular way of doing business? I can see a lot of frustration there.
I need to ask Lord Krishna, Christ, and Allah, all three. We don't know, because whatever answer we say is going to be at the best estimate of what anybody can do. But one thing we have learned is, I don't think we should do quick fix solution. We need to make even whether it's a third or fourth or 10th wave, we have to start making some basic fundamental changes. What we found here is we were lacking in intensive care infrastructure in this country. Even to do with any pandemic, forget it, don't is COVID or whatever. So I think we need to put a lot of focus on improving intensive care infrastructure. That intensive care means whether it is oxygen, ventilators, this, and both government and private has to step up their infrastructure to become, I think we were always lacking, which we knew this for a country like ours. Do we have enough intensive care beds, enough ventilators, enough oxygen? For sure, no, because we always thought we are a very healthy population, or we thought we had a concept that we are health careless, we don't care, somehow we will survive. So this is not going to stand good forever. So this time has come, we need to improve the infrastructure. So we should get prepared for a third wave or fourth wave. Whether it comes or not is not in our hand. There's a lot of theories and algorithms. I think there is so much WhatsApp doctors and Google aunties are going around. So much things are talked, and I don't think we can make any. But as medical professionals, we will simply say we have to be prepared for a third wave. If it doesn't come, it's good for us. Not that we say, oh, why did we prepare for it? It's very good for us by being prepared for that third wave. And if some analogy goes about it is going to affect the children, it's going to be a lot more painful than even the second wave. So we have to be prepared on not only taking care of the adults' requirement, but also the pediatric and the infant requirements by getting our healthcare infrastructures growing. So we should, and this is not going to go waste. We cannot consider investments in healthcare as a waste. We are investing a lot in defense. We are investing a lot in many other luxury stuff and so many other things. So I think investing in healthcare is a necessity and we should do that.
Yeah. You asking?
No, please go ahead.
I'll ask one more. I think we are a little bit over time again, but I'll ask one question. Quite a few other questions that has come up, but then one question is, what would be your 3 advice to the young entrepreneur who wants to follow their passion in healthcare sector?
No, whichever sector, first is hard work. You have the say. I initially itself answered. I said that passion. I said belief, passion, and commitment is what you have to do. So you need and everything is the simple word is hard work. There's nothing can replace hard work. So if you do hard work and you go after your passion with full commitment and belief, you should. When you succeed is the question. But one day you will succeed. In some form or other, you will succeed. That is my belief.
Doctor, I have one question which we can treat as a final question, but you certainly don't seem to be someone who is going to stop, immaterial rage. You seem to be someone who is always driven and going for it. So what would be your goals for your own organization? And what do you think as a country we should have our healthcare goals, realistic healthcare goals for the next next decade or so?
As a chief executive of 2 companies where I'm involved in executive role, Neuberg and Trivitron, we plan to have both become a public companies in the next 2 to 3 years time. Both of them first, Neuberg, and a little later Trivitron. That's something we are planning. It's more to make it more transparent and also help the team members who are there to start realizing some wealth and being with us in the long years. That's the main thing for Trivitron and Neuberg. As a country, as I already answered, saying that I think healthcare needs a lot more focus. Whether it is medical device, medical education, healthcare services, or diagnostics, all needs more and more investments, not only from government, from private individuals, from multinationals, from NGOs. Any kind of investments in healthcare is welcome, as long as it focuses on one objective of enhancing access and affordability to healthcare for larger section of the population.
Thank you, Doctor. From my side, it was an absolute pleasure. We've covered such a wide range of topics, and I'm quite amazed at the depth of your knowledge and the conviction in your beliefs. So it's a pleasure talking to you, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you all for everybody for joining this meeting, and thank you Anas and Pramod for.
Thank you everyone. I mean, thanks for joining us today, and. I hope you all had a good time. Thanks from our side. Over to you, Anil.
Yeah, thank you. On behalf of the teams of IIFL Wealth and Hurun India, we thank all of you for joining us for this wonderful interactive session. We hope to host you soon. Stay safe and have a nice evening.